could you describe your background in relation to payments and your role at Accenture in terms of what you're focusing on at the moment?
Yeah, my role at Accenture is I lead the payments business globally for Accenture, which includes the work we do with big financial institutions, the payment organizations themselves, and more recently, over the last couple of years, we are looking to expand further into non-financial services industry. So we're doing a lot of work with public sector organizations as well as retailers, software and platforms, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And the type of work which we do ranges from strategic engagements through to more transformation end to end, also a lot of technology and operations engagements. Yeah.
So you're covering every aspect of the entire payments chain. So that's good.
Yeah, but we don't have our own products or services. As in, we don't have our own, like a core payment engine product, or we don't have our own cards product or acquiring product, but we would come in typically to help implement or transform on the back of it. That's right.
Okay, so looking at the current market as it stands, how are corporate payment solutions being used across public entities and in the private sector at the moment in terms of the trends that you're seeing there?
Yeah, so from a corporate payments perspective, clearly it is not at the same pace, or it is not as disrupted as retail payments, right? It is still largely controlled and provided by the banks. Used, I mean, by corporate, I would assume you mean medium to large corporates, right? So is dealt with within the treasuries or the finance departments of various organizations. What are some of the trends? I mean, clearly, if you look at a lot of buying that has been shifting. Earlier on, a lot of the buying would not happen through the large marketplaces. Even in the corporate side, we're saying that some of the large marketplaces as well as retail-like behavior in terms of moving to large marketplaces to buy is a definite trend, which is where payments, I mean, if the buying behavior is shifting, that's where some of the payments are shifting to. So I think that's definitely one we are noticing. The other trends definitely is around virtual account management. We are seeing most of the organizations looking at how they can create value by providing virtual account structure for their clients, especially for large complex customers, be able to solve the problems around ease of sweeping, pooling, and other solutions. So I think that's an area where we are seeing a lot of action. Some of the other areas where we are seeing a lot of investment is going in is to streamline the whole trade finance processes. I don't know if that is included in your corporate payments definition, but we see, I mean, all said and done, that is still a highly manual and inefficient process. And there are lots of savings to be had by making it a more digital and an automated process. So we're seeing a lot of activity there. Some of the other areas where wholesale as a whole is changing includes, wholesale, cards, which are also, I mean, just like retail, more virtual cards, tail spend cards is definitely an area where we're seeing more and more traction, and like slightly behind retail in terms of the overall value proposition, but things are picking up. From a corporate API perspective, we are not seeing that many APIs where the possibility is huge, but because the standards are lacking, it's still like behind from a retail perspective. What else? I think we're seeing big move in terms of the card acquiring payments infrastructure. I mean, clearly the large organizations like Adyen have have changed the game. And even if you look at some of the existing players and the new players like Stripe and others are moving more to the large corporates as well, and they see a lot of value in bringing together the acquiring experience alongside the treasury management experience. And I think that's where we're seeing more activity from the large acquirers as well. Um, what else? I think that's a good start. Like, I mean, there's a lot of changes. It's still slow. It's still complex. You need corporates to change at the same time as the large banks, and it's not a fast process. So it's slow but surely it is changing. I mean, if you look at some of the other changes which are happening in the industry around real-time payments, around ISO 2022, they all have big impact on corporates. But I think translating those changes into benefits for corporates is not synchronous because of the large change programs, the various priorities. First the bank needs to implement it, then it slowly needs to flow into the corporate, and there is a process to go through.
Mm-hmm. And what impact has COVID-19 had in terms of accelerating that trend towards digitisation in the corporate space?
I mean, in general, most people have not come to office during the lockdown periods, for example, right? Which is where I've seen like how people have realized that some of the processes which were either outsourced or offshored and others, and they've realized that they haven't changed for a while, and then now that they had to look at it differently and apply different procedures during the lockdowns, they're realizing that they can be further streamlined in a significant way. There is I mean, all the impacts around increasing digitization, which has changed the consumer behaviors. As a result, the corporate stance towards them has also changed, right? Because as a corporate, you need to um, start to think about the more digital channels and their feed into the treasury area. So I mean, as their e-com volumes are going up. I mean, this is for B2C corporates. You would then we are seeing that. Um, I mean, the whole digitization is a key aspect, which is also flowing through in terms of corporates. So they are, yeah. I mean, so both in terms of um, operation staff not being able to come into the office, and they had to look at the processes again, which is kind of driving behaviors around can be automated, can be repurposed, the back office solutions, but front office as well. They are starting to think about how to look at the overall proposition. So absolutely on both sides.
Mm-hmm. What role do challenger banks play in the corporate payment space at the moment, and how are they disrupting the traditional relationships that corporates would have had with legacy banks and other traditional providers?
Yeah, I mean, the most challengers have started, yeah, most challenger banks have started in the retail space, right? So when you a licensed bank as an entity, when you talk about it, but the corporate space is or corporate payment space is not without any challenge, because I think what's happening is slowly the propositions which started with retail are moving up the chain. So you look at, say, TransferWise, right? It started in the remittance market. You look at the propositions around moving up the chain to SME, and further up is the natural extension. You look at Stripe, which started with more SMB customers, and now they're going enterprise and into the treasury management space. You look at like a lot of these. I would call them startups or fintechs because they are scale ups in themselves and sometimes larger than the banks themselves in terms of their market cap. But a lot of them are moving up the value chain to be able to service um, larger customers. And I think, um, yeah, as I mentioned, it is. Um, Step two of the process. I mean, we haven't seen that much disruption, especially also on the API side, as I mentioned, like corporate APIs are not as standardized, the aggregators are not there, the propositions are not there. I mean, now we finally see the retail data and APIs like like starting to get more and more traction, and the curve is picking up even for PISP payments. But you know that on the corporate side, it's I mean, but the corporate's usage and interaction with retail has changed, right? So if you look at I mean, HMRC, they've introduced the PISP payments. Tesco has introduced it, and their interaction from cards to other payment types has clearly increased. So it's I think in those cases it is more partnerships between the fintechs and the large organizations. In some cases, some of the fintechs or startups in the payment space are moving up the chain. Um, I mean, yeah, you can look at um, certain startups focusing on the SMB sector, but large corporate is still an area which I don't think is impacted as much, but it is coming.
Mhm.
Would you agree, Victor?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, from everything I'm seeing in the market at the moment, it's playing out exactly as you've described it. But I just wanted to touch on what you mentioned about PISPs and other entities coming into the market, especially with the open banking directive. How do you? It's obviously activities being more focused on the consumer side, but do you see activity picking up on the corporate side as well?
I mean, I think the potential is huge, right? So a real-time corporate dashboard on what's happening where across multi-bank, where you can provide it and allow you to sweep and pool money and move it around, and it is great potential. I think for that to happen, all the corporate bank accounts need to be exposed in form of APIs or the data in it. You be able to initiate payments, and I think that journey is slightly behind the retail side. So while I mean, some of the leading banks have exposed APIs and others, unless everyone or all the major ones expose all the corporate bank accounts and all the different products and the the overlay services to actually allow you to have digital dashboards, move things instantaneously between various accounts and others. We haven't realized the full potential. I think that's the direction of travel. I think the industry is not ready yet there, ready yet to exploit it fully.
Looking at regional differences, how different is the UK and then Europe to the rest of the world? Obviously, the US is the biggest commercial card market in the world, but are other regions doing things differently or in a more optimized way in terms of the solutions that they're picking up right now?
I mean, we are seeing big differences in based on the markets themselves. I mean, the core traditional transaction banking is the same, right? Everywhere, you still have the same players, whether it is Citibank or Standard Chartered or Deutsche Bank, serving most of those markets, whether it's HSBC serving Asia as well as UK, Deutsche, like I mean, Citi, JPM, they're still the same, and Bank of America serving the same markets. I mean, clearly Goldman Sachs entry into the market has been more recent and trying to secure the market. So they're clearly, I mean, sorry, I should have mentioned it in your previous question around new entrants. I clearly Goldman Sachs is a change with more um, newer propositions. But if I go back to, are there regional differences? Different countries have different nuances. So if you look at, say, a country like India, where there's UPI, and that is driving a certain set of payment activity and behaviors given the UPI. We've got PSD2 and open banking in Europe, which is allowing, I mean, which is creating, on one hand, authentication nightmares for certain players. On the other hand, it's driving certain behavior given the openness of availability of data and be able to initiate payments. So I mean, US, this real-time payments is not fully adopted yet in Europe. I mean, we've had SEPA Instant pretty much adopted fully, and faster payments has been there for a long time across the board. So there, I mean, whether it is it will eventually be all real time. It will eventually be all API based access. But I think there is, in my mind, there's different stages of evolution. I mean, clearly, if you look at the cash and the check usage as well, it's in different stages, right? Like you look at the Nordics, you look at some of the other places. I mean, even UK, we've got it down significantly, but US is still very high. So, and Italy, Spain, Germany is still high too. So it really depends on where the different countries are in their journey and what are some of the products um, that have evolved from that perspective. Um, I clearly say from a infrastructure and availability perspective. I mean, UK is definitely leading, but also some of the Asian markets are leading. US is leading in certain areas, depending on which product you look at. Like, I mean, you were mentioning corporate cards there. So I don't know if that answers your question, whether it's not a clear answer.
Yeah. Just expanding on your mention of virtual cards, they've become very popular in the States particularly, but do you see them having potential to increase usage in Europe, especially to improve acceptance among suppliers, for example? Are there any benefits that they can offer suppliers that haven't been made aware of so far?
I definitely think it has got a huge benefit in terms of managing your tail spend, right? Like rather than, um, um, yeah, the whole tail spend management. I'm sure FIS, I'm not fully aware of their exact product set, but like, I mean, lots of players have got offerings in that space to be able to manage tail spend, and clearly it's a good, I mean, the virtual cards are a good mechanism, a low cost mechanism, and an efficient mechanism to address it. What else on virtual cards? I mean, yeah, I think the ease, the convenience, the frictionless nature of them, in addition to um, yeah, managing this. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't, I think I did a really good hack on this. I'm so sorry. I haven't had any prep before this call, so I'm
That's
just,
okay.
I can dig it out. I think I had a whole pack on where the corporate card market is going globally, but for some reason my email is just not opening. But anyways, yeah, you keep going.
Yeah, just to add on to that, virtual cards in the travel segment, they're quite a new proposition in that sector, but is that something that can help T&E spending to recover to close to pre-pandemic levels? If companies have more visibility over real-time data and transactional data with virtual cards, is there more
I mean,
potential?
T&E has changed forever, right? So we we know when we made the whole um, move from, or in terms of introducing conference calls, it was a big thing. I remember 2007, 2008, and now we went through a second cycle. I mean, I think this is clearly another cycle where
Mm-hmm.
people have realized that you can work remotely as well as face to face. So, what does that mean? I mean, it clearly means that will we will get back to pre-COVID levels, but not the same level. I think business travel has reduced for sure, and that is the nature um, um, of the beast, right? Like no one for a meeting will go to the US if they know that it can happen via Zoom or Teams very effectively. So I think those some of the changes in elastic, and I think that that will remain. So, but having said that, um, things are picking up. I mean, people are back in office. The travel is back or ish, and. And we will see increased spend. I mean, clearly, Money 2020 happened this year face to face, as an example. Cyber still was virtual, and we will start seeing some travel. So T&E spend, um, will virtual card have an impact on T&E? I think T&E spend is more impacted by the policies and how the organizations would like to have the hybrid of virtual and physical events. I'm just trying to think. Will virtual cards impact T&E? So if I look at our company, if I were to give someone a virtual card, will they all have their own corporate card in any case? And it's more about should they go or not go, and should they do it online versus having a virtual card. I mean, maybe in some cases where there is um, uh, you want more controlled spend, a virtual card can definitely help because um, you can control it more easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've answered your question, but
No, that was very. Looking at the role of partnerships, do you see relationships between different entities embracing a spirit of collaboration more now in order
yeah,
to drive evolution in these services?
absolutely. I mean, that's the need of the hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what organizations are realizing is that they cannot do everything themselves, and the speed at which the market is demanding them to do things, even if they want to do everything themselves, they just can't then compete across all areas at the same time themselves. So the spirit of partnership is definitely there, and I feel that's the way forward. I mean, there's lots of fintechs coming up, the tech providers are coming up. You've got organizations like FIS, Fiserv, and others, and I think everyone has a place in the ecosystem when you put it all together. So I do believe that
Mm-hmm.
we'll see more and more partnerships as organizations look to bundle up different propositions in the market. I mean, we can already see that spirit is actually very live when you look at the various fintechs themselves, right? Like um, if you look at fintech collaboration between themselves, it's a lot higher than if you look at some of the traditional players and the collaboration between themselves. So uh, I think that's the direction of travel.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, one fintech using another's payments infrastructure for a little bit, and then evolving it over a period of time. I think that those things are very common, and I think it's about speed, um, and delivering the right customer experience and the best of breed and others, more than the control and only I can do it. And like it's a slightly different um, mindset, I would say.
Hmm. For any business that's looking to either implement a corporate payment solution or improve what they already have, what would you describe as being the key components that they need to have in order to effectively implement the optimal solution?
I think what I'm seeing more of and is the right direction of travel is the whole approach to engage the customers through the journey, right? So like the whole thing about let's build a solution and sell it is something which is changing to let's involve the customers, let's co-create it with the customers and work through that together is definitely a big change as we see it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, what are the other success factors? I would say having the same mindset that a growing fintech and retail would have when you're looking at corporate payments is quite important, and I think there is definitely value there in terms of um, thinking about it like collaboration, bringing things together, creating best of breed customer experience is going to be significantly important. Um, so I think that's definitely area I would suggest to look at.
Mhm.
Mentioning, let me bring it up. So if you look at this B2B e-commerce. Um, I mean, what you can see, and this is US data, right? So it's not necessarily here, but essentially Amazon or Google being, even for B2B purchases, being the first port of call. And then there are the supplier websites, which means, how things are being ordered is is changing, which is what I was saying, right? Around where people are researching. And then where um, and once, I mean, obviously, if they don't know, which means that the likely scenario as to where they will buy will also change, and then also how when they know what they want to buy, obviously it's slightly different, which is kind of interesting. Um, what else? Uh, I mean, if we can talk about this, but essentially, clearly, the whole thing around whether it is a low value spend versus a high value spend, and that is driving the whole change from whether it is done at the merchant side or at the e-com side, and people would go to different um, sites to buy. And while this is US data, it is quite interesting as to how um, some of the newer players are making inroads into traditionally what used to be Sapariba and some of the other players. So I think there's a shifting market.